Everyone in town knew the man in the oil-stained overalls. They called him Grease Man. Never Ed, never Mister, never by his real name. He lived alone, spoke rarely, and worked on cars that shouldn't have still been alive. Teenagers mocked him. Adults forgot about him. But when a high-ranking military officer stepped into his dusty garage one Friday afternoon and stood at attention, calling him Sir, every assumption about the quiet old mechanic shattered. Before we begin, tell us where you're watching from. And don't forget to like the video. In Brookridge, the seasons changed, but some things stayed the same. The smell of diesel near the grain elevators, the wind that rattled the old diner's windows each October, and the sound of a ratchet wrench echoing from the corner lot off Highway 6. That was Ed's auto, or what used to be. The faded red letters above the garage had lost their battle with time. No one remembered when the shop stopped being a business and started being a rumor. The man who worked there didn't advertise, didn't post hours, didn't smile for photos. Locals called him Grease Man. No one could say if he liked the nickname, but no one ever heard him complain either. He wasn't exactly hidden, but he existed like a shadow at the edge of town life. Not quite included. Not quite dismissed. Every morning at 6 a.m., he opened the roll-up door by hand, squealing metal against rusted tracks. Every evening at 7 o'clock, he shut it the same way. In between, he worked. Always alone. Always deliberate. His hands were dark with oil, his nails permanently stained. His jumpsuit bore no name patch, just a faded American flag stitched onto one shoulder, frayed, but still holding. High school kids told stories about him. He lives in the garage, one would whisper. He was a prisoner once. That's why he doesn't talk. Nah, I heard he used to be rich. Then he went nuts and started fixing engines for free. Most didn't believe a word of it. But they didn't stop telling the stories either. The truth was simpler and stranger. No one knew who he really was. The town's newer folks had never seen him anywhere else, not at the diner, not at the gas station, not even at the annual Memorial Day pancake breakfast. But every time someone's old truck refused to start, or a combine starter failed right before harvest, someone always mumbled, "Take it to Grease Man. He'll fix it." And he did. For nearly nothing. He kept no cash register. Just a tin box where folks dropped bills, if they could afford it. If not, he nodded once and waved them off. That Monday, a college kid named Julian rolled into town with a trailer-towed relic, a 1970 GMC pickup, moss-streaked, the kind of machine that had long since passed from classic to forgotten. Julian had inherited it from an uncle he barely remembered. All he knew was that it didn't start. The engine turned once, then died. When he asked around, the waitress at the diner pointed him to Grease Man. "Looks like a haunted shack," she warned. "But he's good." Julian wasn't so sure. When he pulled up, the place looked abandoned. The front office window was cracked and yellowed with grime. A rusted Harley sat out front with weeds growing around its wheels. Then the garage door creaked open. Slowly, like it was waking up. Out stepped a man tall and gray-bearded, with thick shoulders and sun-dark skin. His eyes were hidden beneath a cap that had once been navy blue. He said nothing. "You fix trucks?" Julian asked, voice uncertain. Grease Man glanced at the GMC, walked over, ran one hand along the hood. His fingers paused above a bullet-sized dent near the fender. "Got a name?" the old man asked, voice gravel and dusk. Julian." The mechanic nodded. "Leave it. Come back tomorrow." Julian blinked. "You don't want to know what's wrong with it?" "I already do." He turned and disappeared inside. Julian stood alone in the gravel for a moment, then climbed back into his car and drove away. Behind him, the roll-up door groaned shut. The old man, now alone with the truck, placed one hand on the engine and whispered something under his breath. The air smelled like burned oil and something older. Something buried. The next day, Julian returned just after noon. He'd meant to come earlier, but nerves and a slow breakfast delayed him. When he pulled up, the garage door was already open. Inside, the 70 GMC sat with its hood up and cables snaking across the concrete like veins. Grease Man was under the chassis, boots sticking out, the slow rhythm of socket wrenches clicking through silence. A small radio sat on the tool bench, playing some old warbling jazz station no one under 60 would recognize. Julian approached slowly. "Hey, you said come back today." The old man rolled out on a creeper, sat up, and wiped his hands with a shop rag. His eyes were sharper than Julian remembered. There was intelligence there, buried, sure, but intense. Measuring. "It's the ignition coil, and your fuel line's rotted. Whoever owned this didn't believe in maintenance." Julian nodded, as if he understood. Can you fix it? Already did. What? Really? The old man stood and disappeared briefly behind the bench. He returned with a single key. Turn it over. Julian climbed into the driver's seat, uncertain. The cabin smelled of mildew, old tobacco, and rusted time. He slipped in the key, turned, and the engine coughed, stuttered, then roared to life like it had never been asleep. It was deep, rumbling, and alive. Julian grinned in disbelief. Man, seriously, that's incredible. Greaseman just nodded. You were military, right? Julian asked, impulsively, pointing to the faded flag on the man's sleeve. That's not the usual uniform patch. The mechanic didn't answer. He walked back to the bench and reached for a pair of pliers. I'm just curious, Julian added quickly. You just don't see many people who can do that anymore. With no manuals, no diagnostics. A pause. I knew engines long before they started thinking for themselves. That was all he said. Julian lingered a moment, then fished for his wallet. So how much do I owe you? Whatever you've got. What? No way. This is real work. The old man shrugged. Then give me what it's worth. Julian pulled out $60 and placed it on the bench. The old man didn't even look. As he turned to leave, Julian hesitated. I think I might drive this back to school. My uncle used to say this truck had teeth. Greaseman raised one eyebrow. He was right. Julian left with the engine growling like thunder behind him, windows down despite the cold. Inside the garage, the old man stood still for a long time. Then he walked to a back shelf and pulled down a wooden box. Inside was a photograph. For men in desert camo, arms slung over shoulders, dirt streaked across their faces. That truck, sat in the background, barely visible. On the back of the photo was a name. Ramadi, 2005. 3rd SFG. Operation Dawnwall. He stared at the picture for several minutes before returning it to the box. Have you ever known someone who carries others quietly, without asking for thanks? Share their story, because even when the world forgets, we remember. That night, the garage light stayed on past midnight. Not for work, for remembering. 2 days later, the truck came back. Not on a tow, not on a trailer, but roaring into the lot under its own power, dust swirling behind its tires like a storm brewing on gravel. Julian jumped out before the engine even finished turning over. She's amazing, he said, breathless. I just drove 2 hours straight without a single hiccup. Felt like I was steering a tank. The whole time, I was thinking, how the hell did you bring it back to life? Greaseman didn't respond. He stepped forward, eyes narrowing slightly, not at Julian, but at the windshield. Something was different. A sticker now rested in the corner of the glass. A round decal, clean and modern. Its edges were sharp, and the background shimmered faintly under the fall sunlight. Did you put that there? The old man asked. Julian looked. Oh no, that was there already, I think. I just cleaned the window. Greaseman leaned in. The sticker bore a unit insignia, not one commonly seen in Brookridge, or anywhere, really. A black sword overlaying a falcon's wing. Beneath it, Latin words, Virtus in silentio. Strength in silence. The old man took a half-step back. His mouth tightened. Something in his eyes shifted, like an old safe unlocking behind them. You knew this truck, Julian said softly. The old man didn't move. You served with my uncle? That did it. Greaseman looked up, and for the first time, really saw the young man. What was his name? Michael Barron. There was a silence that stretched wider than the garage. Then the old man reached over and shut off the ignition. The rumble died. Only the ticking of cooling metal filled the space. I didn't serve with your uncle, he said quietly. I commanded him. Julian's breath caught. What? The old man turned and walked to the back of the garage. This time, he opened a drawer. From it, he retrieved a second wooden box, smaller than the first. He placed it on the bench and opened it slowly. Inside, a patch identical to the one on the windshield. A few medals, darkened with age, and a laminated document, folded and worn. Julian leaned in. The letterhead read, Special Forces Command, Confidential Operations Registry. His eyes scanned the page until he found the name. Lieutenant Colonel Edward R. Keegan. The old man. Greaseman. And beneath it, another line. Operation Dawnwall, Classified Level 3, Commanding Officer, Lieutenant Colonel Keegan. Mission status, compromised. Final record, sealed. You were Special Forces? The old man didn't answer. I didn't even know my uncle served in Iraq. Nobody ever said anything. He was one of the quiet ones, the old man said. Best kind. What happened? Keegan's face hardened. We went in light. Too light. Got cut off. 5 men. 2 days. Only 2 of us made it out. Julian swallowed. My uncle. Keegan nodded. He got the rest of us out. Took a round to the shoulder. Still carried a man twice his size through the dust. Refused to leave him. Julian's eyes burned suddenly, unexpectedly. He looked down. I wish I'd known. You do now? There was a pause. Then Julian asked, why don't you tell people? You could have a whole wall of medals. The old man closed the box. I didn't come back for a wall. He nodded toward the garage. I came back to fix things that people forgot. If you're outraged, type shame in the comments to stand with those who sacrificed for our country. That evening, the sun set over Brookridge with a glow like fire through fog. Julian stood beside the truck, hands in his pockets, unsure what to say. Finally, he spoke. Sir, I'm proud to have met you. Keegan didn't reply. But when Julian turned back toward his car, he saw the old man quietly lift one hand, fingers curled in a half salute. It was the smallest motion, and the loudest truth. By the time Monday came around, Brookridge had already begun to murmur. It started at the diner. Where else? Doris, who'd run the counter since Clinton was president, leaned over her 3rd coffee refill and whispered, someone said the grease man used to be a colonel. Like, real army brass. Special ops or something. Grease man? You mean the guy who smells like diesel and WD-40? Laughed Dave from the hardware store. Same one. A college kid brought in a truck last week. They were out back talking for hours. No way, someone muttered. I saw the truck, said Bill from City Works. It's got a military unit sticker on the windshield. One I've never seen. Not even online. That was enough. The town didn't buzz so much as hum. The kind of quiet vibration that moved between people who had too much time and just enough curiosity. By Tuesday, kids were biking past Ed's auto in slow circles. Veterans started parking closer, lingering longer. Someone left a folded American flag on the hood of a rusted Oldsmobile out front. No note, no message. Just a folded flag. Inside, Keegan ignored most of it. He worked in silence, methodical as ever. His days hadn't changed. He still rolled up the door at 6 o'clock sharp. Still wiped his hands on the same red rag. But something had shifted in the air around him. It wasn't attention he feared. It was reverence. That kind of gaze could hollow a man out. Julian returned late in the afternoon with a folder under his arm. I looked up everything I could, he said, sliding the folder across the bench. You're not in any public records. I mean, there's mentions, bare-bones stuff. Rank, unit, but nothing detailed. It's like your entire history got wiped. Keegan didn't even glance at the folder. It was supposed to be. But why? Julian asked. Shouldn't people know? The old man turned a bolt on a carburetor. It clicked, firm. Truth doesn't need permission to exist. Julian sat down on a stool, frustrated. But there are kids in this town who think you're just a weird old guy, that you talk to engines and live in the past. I do talk to engines. Julian smiled despite himself. But seriously, he pressed. There's a school Veterans Day thing. You should come. Speak. Keegan froze. Not interested. Why not? They don't need stories from old ghosts. Julian didn't push further. Not right away. But he left the folder on the workbench. Inside were printouts of photos, a few news clippings, and a page from a long-forgotten commendation report, declassified only recently. The ink was faded, but one paragraph remained legible. Lieutenant Colonel Keegan demonstrated sustained heroism during a 48-hour encirclement operation in Anbar Province. His refusal to abandon injured personnel despite hostile engagement saved multiple lives. At the bottom, a signature, C. A. Matheson, General, U.S. Army. Julian hadn't highlighted anything. He didn't need to. That night, Keegan read it. Quietly. Alone. Under a single bulb in the back of the garage. He reached for a lighter at one point. Held the flame near the page. Then lowered it. Let it burn out. If this makes you angry, type respect in the comments. The next morning, before the sun crested the water tower, Keegan was already working again. But this time, he left the roll-up door open just a little longer. It was a Thursday when the SUV arrived, black, boxy, polished like obsidian. It pulled into the gravel lot with the sound of tires too clean for Brookridge. The engine purred once, then silenced. Greaseman, Lieutenant Colonel Keegan, was under the hood of an old Mercury Cougar when he heard the door click open. Boots. Dress leather. Not the steel-toed, grease-slick kind he was used to. Two men approached. One wore a formal military uniform, the other a dark civilian suit with a Department of Defense lapel pin. Neither said a word at first. Keegan straightened, slow but steady, wiped his hands on a cloth, and looked at them square. "You're early," he said, his voice dry as the tools on his bench. The uniformed man stepped forward and saluted. "Colonel Keegan, I'm Major Daniel Ross. This is Mr. Langley, Department of Veteran Affairs. I haven't worn that title in 20 years. You may want it back, sir." "Temporarily." Keegan didn't answer, didn't blink. Langley stepped forward. "We found the footage. Your garage. Your work. The unit patch on that truck. It's been circulating. Some of the younger analysts thought it was an urban legend, but someone recognized your face." "From where?" "Operation Dawn Wall," Langley said quietly. "They served under you." Keegan's jaw tightened. He knew where this was going. Langley opened a folder, thicker than Julian's, and set it gently on the hood. "Your service records were sealed, but a congressional review panel has been revisiting incomplete commendations from classified operations. There's a movement to recognize you formally. They want you at the Pentagon ceremony next month." "I'm not interested in ceremonies. It's not just for you." Langley placed a small photograph beside the folder. It showed 5 young soldiers, dust-covered, grinning. One of them was Keegan, decades younger. Another was Michael Barron, Julian's uncle. "They're building a memorial wall," Langley added, "for the ones no one talks about. No speeches, no cameras, just names." Keegan stared at the photo. "Michael should be there," he said quietly. "He will be, but they want you to add his name." The 3 stood in silence. From the road, a school bus rumbled past. Kids pressed faces to the glass, staring at the strange car and the solemn conversation. Finally, Keegan spoke. "I'll think about it." "That's all we ask," Langley said. The men turned to leave, but Major Ross paused. "Sir," he added, "my brother was with you. Staff Sergeant Darren Ross." Keegan's brow twitched. "He was the radio man," Ross added. "Didn't make it out." Keegan nodded, just once. "He was brave. Held the line so the others could move." "Thank you," Ross whispered. Then they left. Keegan stood alone, the photo still on the hood. Julian arrived 15 minutes later, carrying a paper bag with lunch. He stopped when he saw the photo, the file. "More ghosts?" he asked. "No," Keegan said. "Old friends." He took the photo and placed it gently in the box with the patch and medals. Outside, the wind stirred. Inside, the ghosts settled, for now. Have you ever witnessed someone punished for an act of kindness? If so, share a small word of gratitude for them in the comments. Even just a name is enough to keep light in our lives. The Pentagon never got its ceremony, because Lieutenant Colonel Edward Keegan didn't go. But that didn't mean nothing happened. 2 weeks later, something else stirred. Quietly, purposefully. It began with a wooden bench placed by the edge of Lake Barrage, where fishermen cast lines and high schoolers skipped stones. It appeared overnight, polished, handmade, with a small brass plaque bolted to the top slat. No fanfare, no ribbon cutting, just 6 words engraved in perfect serif. For those who stayed quiet, but stayed. People noticed. The mayor didn't, but the janitor from the elementary school did. So did the barber, and the old woman who still fed ducks every Tuesday morning. One by one, they sat on that bench. And somehow, it felt different. Bigger than a gesture, smaller than a statue. Word spread, not through headlines, but through conversation. At gas pumps, in grocery aisles. "You see that new bench? Who put it there?" Doesn't say, but some knew. And those who did kept the secret like a sacred thread. Julian found out when Keegan handed him the receipt. "You built it." "I owed them something," Keegan replied. "The ones who didn't come back." Julian sat beside him the next evening, both watching the water ripple against the rocks. "Everyone in town's talking about you now," he said. "They say you're a hero." "I'm not." "I know," Julian nodded. "But they're not talking about the medals. They're talking about the work. About you fixing cars for nothing, carrying veterans' bills, teaching some kid how to rebuild a carburetor for free." Keegan didn't look over. "That's not heroism. That's habit. Maybe it's both." A breeze stirred. Leaves rattled. Then Julian added, "The school wants you to speak next week. Just 10 minutes. You could tell them anything, even about the bench." Keegan finally turned. "I'll think about it." That Sunday, a black sedan pulled up to the garage again. This time it was just one man. Older, uniform crisp, chest full of commendations. His cane tapped once on the pavement. Colonel Keegan? Keegan looked up from the undercarriage of a 1994 F-150. Don't call me that. You pulled my nephew out of a crater near Tikrit in '05. Keegan didn't answer. The man stepped closer. His name was Alan. He never spoke after the war, but he kept a photo of you taped inside his footlocker. Your name on the back. Keegan wiped his hands. Is he okay now? No. He died last year. But before he went, he told me, if you ever meet Keegan, tell him he didn't fail us. Keegan said nothing. Then, barely audible, he murmured, none of them ever failed me. Have you known someone like that? Someone who carries others quietly, without asking for thanks? Share their story, because even when the world forgets, we remember. The man offered a salute. Keegan didn't return it. He stepped forward and embraced him instead. By the end of the month, Ed's auto looked exactly the same. The roll-up doors still screeched. The walls still bore decades of dust. The same rust-stained coffee mug still sat on the bench, etched with a faded Goodyear logo. But the people coming through the lot were no longer just there for busted alternators. They came to talk, or just to watch. Keegan tolerated it, barely. He didn't care for attention, but he noticed the difference. Someone had left a pie on the hood of a '91 Civic. No note, just a folded napkin with a smiley face. A woman from the VA office stopped by with a folded flannel and a note, for cold nights and quiet service. The local high school shop class sent a thank you card signed by all 27 students. One of them included a hand-drawn diagram of a carburetor with the label, inspired by the colonel. Julian visited almost daily now, not just as a student, but as a kind of apprentice. He helped organize tools, kept logs, and stayed after dark just to listen. You ever regret it? He asked one evening, wiping down a socket wrench. Regret what? The war. The silence. Not saying who you were. Keegan looked up from the brake pads he was replacing. His eyes were calm. Every man regrets something, he said. But I never regretted staying quiet. Only the ones I left behind. Julian nodded, letting the silence settle. You're not quiet anymore, he said finally. No, Keegan agreed. But I'm still listening. On Veterans Day, the town finally understood. Not because of a parade. Not because of banners or bagpipes. But because a folding chair sat empty at the center of the school gym, draped in a flag. A small sign rested on the seat. For the one who never asked to be seen. It was Julian's doing. His senior project presentation was simple. He stood at the podium and told the story of a mechanic. A man covered in grease and silence. A man who had once commanded lives in a place no one wanted to remember. He told them about a photo. About Operation Dawnwall. About a pickup truck that came back from the dead. And about a man who could rebuild engines, but never sought to rebuild his own legacy. The gym was silent when he finished. Not out of confusion, but out of awe. Keegan, seated in the very back, rose slowly and stepped outside before the applause began. He walked to the edge of the football field, where a wind had begun to rise. Jasper, the stray mutt he'd taken in weeks ago, followed at his side. He sat on the visitor's bench and looked toward the sunset. Just sat, breathing, watching, feeling something he hadn't felt in years. Seen. Winter came fast that year. By December, frost coated the window panes of Brookridge, and the garage's old heater worked double shifts just to keep the tools from freezing over. Business slowed. Roads iced. But the steady sound of metal on metal never stopped echoing from Ed's auto. Inside, Keegan moved slower these days. The years tugged heavier on his joints now, and the cold crept into the bones he used to trust without question. But he didn't complain. He never had. Julian helped most afternoons after school, still stubborn with questions, still relentless with curiosity. He'd started a blog not for views, but for memory. He called it The Last Quiet Man, filled with stories from the garage, photos of the bench, and interviews with veterans who had served under Keegan but hadn't seen him since the sandstorms of Iraq. By Christmas, the blog had over 60,000 views. Still, Keegan refused interviews. Let the kids talk, he said. They're the future. I'm just what refuses to rust. One morning, Julian arrived to find Keegan already sitting outside on the bench near the roll-up door, wrapped in a thick coat, a fresh cup of coffee in his hands. The sun was barely up. You all right? Julian asked. Keegan didn't look over. You know, he said, there's something they never tell you about coming home. Julian waited. They tell you to move on, to live normal, but they don't explain how to breathe in a world that never saw what you did. Silence passed between them. "But you did it," Julian finally said. "No," Keegan replied. "I just kept waking up." A long pause. "Until I met you." Julian looked down. "I think you've helped more people than you know." Keegan nodded toward the truck Julian now drove, the 70 GMC, newly restored, humming like new life. "Then keep it running," he said. "Let it carry the weight now." On New Year's Eve, the town held a candlelight vigil at the lakefront. Unofficial, unplanned, dozens gathered at the bench Keegan had built. Some spoke, some sat in silence. Others just lit candles and walked away, their faces lost in the flicker of flames and frost. Keegan didn't attend. He stayed in the garage, working late, as always. But later that night, Julian placed something new on the bench, a small metal plate. Engraved in bold, simple font, Lieutenant Colonel Edward R. Keegan, Special Forces, 3rd SFG. He never asked you to look. You did anyway. The next morning, Keegan woke early. He poured coffee, opened the garage, took a long, slow breath, and smiled. For the first time in a long time, the world felt just loud enough to hear him again. If you like this story, please like and subscribe to the channel. Let YouTube promote stories of kindness.